We begin this hour with the latest in a string of hate crimes against Jewish people across the city. We have also learned that there was a sixth attack very early this morning. CBS New York's Nick Calloway has more on that investigation from the Gravesend section of Brooklyn.
So far, there have been at least 6 attacks against Jewish people this week, 2 of them here in Brooklyn, just in the last 24 hours. Avenue U in Gravesend was the site of one of the latest attacks Thursday. A 34-year-old Jewish woman was walking with a 3-year-old child. Witnesses say another woman approached and hit the victim in the face with a grocery bag full of unknown items, then shouted an anti-Semitic slur.
The latest attack here along Broadway in Williamsburg, and we're told the victim was first hit with hate speech and then fists. Here along Broadway in Williamsburg, closest to Jerry Street, is where police say a 22-year-old Hasidic Jewish man was attacked Wednesday afternoon. This witness, Moses Weiser, says it began with 2 women yelling slurs, and when the victim called 911, they allegedly attacked him, using the victim's own cell phone as a weapon.
I heard him. It took him and threw him down to the ground and broke his phone and threw the phone to his head.
Weiser says the victim flagged down officers and caught up to the women at Rutledge Street and Broadway outside a discount store, which is across the street from the 90th Precinct Station House. Police say they expect they'll charge the 24 and 34-year-old women, then add this incident to the list of anti-Semitic hate crimes in New York City.
It's unbelievable what's going on. This is a shame.
Boosted Crime Stopper rewards, extra grant money for security, and extra patrols don't completely satisfy some residents who say job number 1 must be catching all attackers. Police put out 2 videos from incidents in Crown Heights where they believe the suspects who remain on the loose may be the same for both cases. First, this one that shows a 23-year-old Hasidic Jewish man walking near Albany Avenue and Lincoln Place. One of the suspects hits the man in the head with a folded chair. The victim was also punched in the face. Police say minutes earlier and 2 blocks away, a 56-year-old Hasidic Jewish man was walking on Union Street between Albany Avenue and Kingston Avenue. A group approaches from behind, one of them punching him in the back of the head, knocking him to the ground.
A 24-year-old woman was charged today in the latest anti-Semitic attack in New York City. A recent wave of assault has the Jewish community there on edge and police on high alert. Don Daler reports.
Surveillance video of the New Year's Day attack shows a Jewish man in Brooklyn being punched in the neck by a woman after an eyewitness says she yelled anti-Semitic slurs. The 24-year-old woman was arrested. It's just one in a series of at least 13 such attacks, many documented by grainy security video that have happened in the New York City area over the past 10 days. Today, the family of the most seriously injured victim from the Muncie, New York machete attack, 71-year-old Joseph Newman, gave some grim news.
He has a fractured skull. He's been sliced through his neck. He has a shattered arm. The doctors do not have high hopes for him.
New York City has increased police patrols in certain neighborhoods, some of which have been experiencing increased tension between African American and Jewish residents.
It says that in the times of Mashiach, there's going to be many warnings to get up and move. So I said, okay, let's go. But at the same point, I'm like everyone else, and I'm like, my family is here, my grandchildren are here, they don't speak Hebrew. To take them to Eretz Yisrael, they're not going to know what's flying. My business is here, my friends are here. My organization, the ranch and the Ornava and Teres Nava is here. You expect me just to pick up and go? And the answer is yes. This is what happened in the Holocaust when Kristallnacht, when they had these riots and they burnt down shuls. And I've spoken to many Holocaust survivors, and I said, why didn't you run? Why didn't you leave? They burnt down the shuls. And they said, the government is going to pass, he's a fascist, he's a Meshuggah, Hitler, he's a Meshuggah, they're going to throw him out of government, the politics are going to change. And my factory is here, and my family is here, and my parnassa is here, and they didn't leave.
This is a tense time for the Hasidic Jews of Crown Heights, a neighborhood in New York's borough of Brooklyn. Their community has become the target of an increased number of attacks in recent months. Now there's more police on the streets protecting synagogues and other Jewish institutions. Burrell Firestone and his friends are students at the local yeshiva, a Jewish religious school. Anti-Semitism has always been an issue in this ethnically diverse neighborhood, but the recent string of attacks has hit uncomfortably close to home.
Because the sources of these recent anti-Semitic attacks here in the United States are multiple. They're not all coming from white supremacists or white nationalists. They're also coming from street attacks in New York by young African Americans. They're coming from black Hebrews. What seems to be constant is a sense that there's a copycat phenomenon. Now it's become sort of more in vogue to go after Jews who are identifiable on the street.
More than a dozen attacks against the Jewish community have been reported in New York in the last 2 weeks alone, including one during a Hanukkah celebration at a rabbi's home outside the city. 5 people were stabbed.
Anti-Semitic attacks have spread far beyond New York. A new report from the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism at California State University in San Bernardino finds hate crimes against Jewish people across the United States are up and on the rise.
Throughout the history of our people, anytime there was some kind of unrest, anytime there was some kind of dysfunction, let's call it, who was a scapegoat? It was one people. The Talmud tells us, Al tiftach pel l'satan. We don't say bad things. We don't enunciate. We don't articulate bad things. I'm not going to say. Use your imagination. Use your education. Use your knowledge. Who was always the perennial, perpetual, so to speak, scapegoat? Whenever people, the rest of the world, was suffering. We know who the scapegoat was and is. We have to be very, very careful. We need the Shomer Amo Yisrael La'ad, the protector of Israel, the protector of the Jewish people for eternity. We need him more than ever.
First of all, we're seeing a shrinking economic pie. This crisis hit New York City, which is the heart of the financial capabilities of the Jewish people, and it also hit the financial market. So and the implications are also vast across many communities. So the consequence is that the pie of resources will shrink, plus the priorities of philanthropy will also change, and there will probably be a structural shift of money from older money to new money that will emerge as an outcome of this crisis. So all of that together changes the economic foundations of our community. A second major thing that we're looking at is the map of threats to the Jewish people is changing as well. We're seeing a wave of anti-Semitism that builds on the pandemic to attack Jews. But also the better news, or the good news, is that the anti-Israel activities and sentiments are a little bit on the decline. Naturally, the Israel element is now on the back burner.
Speaking to us from Los Angeles is Jonathan Friedman, a store owner from Los Angeles, a store which was ruined during the riots. Shalom.
Hi, how are you?
We're okay. How are you? We see the videos of the ruins, the riots. How was this experiencing this from up close?
Motzei Shabbos, when we went out, we were boarding up my store and a bunch of other stores, a bunch of Jewish people getting together and just helping each other out. We are watching people go from store to store, looting the stores. Motzei Shabbos, there was close to no police around, and for sure none of them doing anything. And it was wild. It was crazy. There was no enforcement whatsoever. And you had all the small businesses in the neighborhood their whole livelihoods being stolen out of their front of their stores by these people with no regard for anything. To quote the officer that I spoke to while they were robbing my store, I was across the street, and he said that we're focusing on loss of life before we focus on the goods. And in my case, I said, I'm not looking for special circumstances, but I own a pharmacy and they're stealing all the drugs, which eventually are going to become your problem. And he said that loss of life comes first. We're focusing on that. Your store is your problem, not ours.
You know what the new rule of the law is in our country? The new rule of law is there is no law. There's no law. You could pillage. You could riot. You could go on a rampage. You could do explicit, open, blatant thievery. And no one cares. You get arrested, you're out within a day. Crazy. I was in Manhattan yesterday, driving by Broadway. Broadway is a district. We have so many different types of stores and shops. Do you know how depressing, how debilitating it was to see all the stores boarded up? This is when we were on the mend, when we were rebounding, recuperating. And now things were supposed to be opening for business. Employees were supposed to be back. It's all shuttered, all boarded up. You know what's going on? We forgot. We forgot that we're in Golos. We forgot that we're in exile. We forgot our priorities. The Talmud tells us, based on this week's Parsha, Parsha Noso, Talmud says, Haroa Saita Bil Kukula. If you see immorality being perpetuated, what do you have to do? You see a wayward woman, any immorality, Yazid Atzmo Miyayin. It's got to change your life. There's certain things you have to renounce. There's certain things you have to withdraw from. There's certain things you have to abstain and refrain from. There's certain things you have to stop. Life can't go on. Because if you witness something that's a culture shock, if you witness something that is inappropriate, if you witness something that shouldn't happen, you're not supposed to be immune. It's supposed to jolt you. It's supposed to impact you. It's supposed to make you a changed person. Haroa Sotu B'Kukula. We, in the past week, we've all seen Sotu B'Kukula. We've seen wanton destruction, like the city of Sodom, like the Dor HaMabul, the generation of Mabul. This is what we're witnessing. We can't go on like normal. Yazid Atzmo Miyayin. You have to change. You have to say to yourself, what am I going to do different?
Big changes in our lives can be very scary. Sometimes it's the fear of failure itself that causes people to fail. Whereas people who are willing to accept the fact that they may not succeed, those are the ones who end up being successful. In this week's Torah portion, the spies come back from touring the land of Israel. And they're scared. They're scared of change, of the unknown. Over here we were the heads. Over there we may not be the heads. And therefore they viewed everything in a skewed type of way. Whereas Yeshua and Kalev were willing to accept the fact that things may not be the same and we may not be the heads. And therefore they're the ones who are able to trust the process of coming into the land of Israel. We live in a time of change. Opportunities for change in our personal lives, in our communal lives, but it's very scary. The question is, are we willing to face the fear and maybe even the failure? And that might be our opportunity to succeed.
We don't want to go just back to our homes in Gaza and the West Bank. We want all of it.
Al-Matli Israel. Al-Matli America.
In a fearsome scene, video published this weekend by Memory, or the Middle East Media Research Institute, showed images not from the streets of Tehran, but from Brooklyn, New York, as angry marchers called for the United States and Israel to be wiped off the face of the earth. Several speakers co-opting the Black Lives Matter movement's inertia, repeating anti-Semitic canards, like how Israel controls the West and how the Jews are colonialist Europeans, while spearheading calls for violence against police and the American public.
The police that are around us are not our friends. You should not speak to them. They are our enemy. They are an impediment to liberation of Palestine. When I saw that precinct burn, I thought I was closer to Palestine. When I see an NYPD cop car burn, I say we're waking up revolutionary culture.
Similarly, marches in Washington, D.C. linking the Black Lives Matter movement to the Palestinian cause, prompting the Republican Jewish coalition to demand that presidential hopeful Joe Biden condemn these anti-Semitic chants. Pro-Israel groups on social media are spooked, posting this picture of a blown-up public bus in response to these calls for an intifada in America, saying they hope Americans won't also have to fear using public transportation.
For more than 2 weeks, this is really all we've covered. There's that much going on right now. We can't cover it all in an hour. Almost all of it, as you know, all the news, is horrifying. Vandals are defacing our country. They're destroying our cities, our institutions, our civil society. They have no right to do any of that. They don't own this country. They did not build it. The rest of us should not allow them to wreck it, but we are allowing them. And it's infuriating to watch. We've definitely been infuriated, genuinely. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the latest addition to the global family of nations, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, formerly known as downtown Seattle.
City Hall! Our City Hall! Who's City Hall? Our City Hall! You about to lose your job! You about to lose your job! City Hall, Moxie, what's up?
Hell yeah. The point is, in the end, this is our street, it's our station. Whose streets? Our streets! Whose streets? Our streets!
For more than a month, mobs of violent, crazy people have roamed this country, terrorizing citizens and destroying things. No one has stopped them from doing that, so they've continued and they've become stronger. Politicians now cower before the mob. Corporate America mouths their slogans. The education cartel, enforced on your children, enforces their demands. Police officers, emasculated and restrained, watch it all from the sidelines, unable to help.
They're trying to find this as a racial issue. This is not about race anymore. It never really was. This is about taking apart the fabric of America.
What in the world? What's going on here? I'm not a fearmonger. Anybody that knows me knows I'm not a fearmonger. But I'm a pragmatic person. I'm a realist. And I'm also an optimist. But anybody who doesn't see the writing on the wall, anyone who has lethargy and is asleep behind the wheel, I'm here to tell you, wake up before it's too late. How many signals, how many signposts, how many messages does Hashem have to send to us to tell us that we're not where we should be? Complacency, lethargy, attrition. That's not Jewish.
As long as our economy and political systems prioritize profit without considering who is profiting, who is being shut out, we will perpetuate this inequality. So we cannot stop at criminal justice system. We must begin the work of dismantling the whole system of oppression.
She's not the only elected official on the left openly calling for America to be destroyed. Listen to this scary message from one of Seattle City Council members. Take a look.
We are coming to dismantle this deeply oppressive, racist, sexist, violent, utterly bankrupt system of capitalism, this police state. We cannot and will not stop until we overthrow it and replace it with a world based instead on solidarity, genuine democracy, and equality, a socialist world.
Less law enforcement in dangerous places means more killings. There's not much debate about that, at least not among adults. New York City disbanded its plainclothes police unit and cut funding for the NYPD by $1 billion. The result? Shootings in New York are up more than 200% compared to this time just last year. Murders are up 21%. Burglaries have risen 30%. It is the most dangerous time to live in New York City in a quarter century. Just last night, an infant was shot to death while sleeping in a stroller at a cookout in Brooklyn. Mayor Bill de Blasio, who's almost single-handedly destroyed that city, described the child's murder as so painful. Then de Blasio moved forward with his plans to disable the NYPD. He canceled the hiring of more than 1,000 cops. He announced that police will no longer keep the schools safe. How will this end? We know very well how it will end. More poor children will die. That will not affect Bill de Blasio, though. His family will remain protected by armed security paid for by taxpayers.
The problem with violence and trashing a city and ruining a country, it's incredibly persuasive visual evidence. I will never forget June 2020.
4 teenagers were leaving the Towson Town Center this last Thursday night when someone grabbed one of the teens, demanding their shopping bags, cell phones, and cash. Now, police say the man had a knife on his waistband and used a slur directed towards Jews, as he also stole a kippah from one of the victims.
Similar to the Jews that lived in the time of Kristallnacht, there were many Jews that were deluding themselves, were mamish in denial. They saw the havoc. They saw the chaos. They saw the virulent anti-Semitism. They saw the terrible, pernicious evil. And they did nothing because they felt too secure. And all those that felt secure, none of them are here, and neither are their descendants, because they and their descendants tragically that thought they had this flourishing businesses and were waiting for their IPOs and waiting for their investments to bear fruit. Many of these people, most of these people, unfortunately, tragically, were turned into lampshades and bars of soap.
All of us, we all need to get out of here. It's not for us anymore, everybody. It's just not for us. It's just, we don't belong here. It's not for us physically. It's not for us mentally. It's not for us emotionally. Hashem took away a lot of the money that was keeping us here, the education that was keeping us here. You want to Zoom? You're not sure, so Zoom. Zoom to your Rebbeim in America. Zoom. You want to Zoom? You can Zoom. You don't have to be. You can speak the language. You can speak Zoom English. All you want. Oh, Hashem, help us. I should have the koyach to lead you.
The writing is on the wall. It's time to make plans, Be'ezer Hashem, to lay the groundwork for the Geula. It's time to plant the seeds for Eretz Yisrael, because our time is very limited. And the limited time allotment that we have here in New York City, we have a lot of unfinished business to do.
Kodesh Baruch Hu wants from us to be able to live a joint life in Eretz Yisrael, which combines together the physical and the spiritual, the living of the land, being successful here in this land physically and spiritually. And there's something to be told over here. People who live in Eretz Yisrael, who are working, who are making a living over here, they live a life that is more focused, that is more goal-oriented, that is more driven, that we know we're living with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're in the house of Hashem. We want values to guide our life and not the next sale and the next July 4th weekend and the next movie and the next Netflix. That's not what's going to decide our life. That's not going to be the culture that's going to drive us, but rather the culture of understanding that we're living and creating a relationship here with HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
According to the Ramban, Nachmanides, it's a mitzvah chiyuvos, it's obligatory. Every moment that you're living over here, you're sinning. The Gemara says, Kol mi shador b'chutzor, anybody who lives in the diaspora, kamisha elol ukad, it's like you're living without a God. It's according to many shittas, and according to many opinions, this is just a laboratory. The real deal is Eretz Yisrael. Here it's all experimental. The mitzvahs we do here is preparatory. But over there, it's authentic.
The Pasuk says, Ki Oretz asher ato vo shoma l'rishta, loi ke'eretz Mitzrayim hi asher yitzosem misham. The land of which you're entering, to possess this land, is very unlike the land of Mitzrayim of Egypt, from which you have just left. And the interesting question is why? Why is Eretz Yisrael so different? Why is Eretz Yisrael different to every other land of the world, as the Torah tells us? Answers the Dubna Magid with a mashal. And he says there was a man who had a son, and this son was a very fine, upstanding member of the community who eventually got married, and he had a child. And it was at this child's bris that the grandfather was asked by his son, please do me a favor. I know you want to make a big spread. I know you want to invite the whole town to this bris. You're a proud grandfather. This is your first grandson. Do me a favor. I want to do something different. So the grandfather says, sure, my dear son, let me hear what you want to do. She says, you know the normal minhag, where you put all the rich people, the choshever people at the front on the top table. Everyone sees them, everyone's looking at them. And the poor people are stuck at the other end of the room. Those people, they're stuck at the other end. Let's switch it. Let's put the poor people at the top table and have the rich people, the ones who get all the covered, let them sit at the end. Because at the end of the day, let's get them to have covered. Let's get them to be happy. Let's get the poor people to feel good. And the grandfather says, my dear son, I understand what you're saying, but it's not going to work. I'll tell you why. He explains a beautiful idea. And he says, because the rich people, you have to understand, they don't come to a bris to eat the food. They don't come for the food. They come from wealthy homes. These people don't need your food. So why do they come? They come for the prestige. They come to sit there on the top table. Everyone sees them. Everyone recognizes them. Everyone's watching them. The poor people, on the other hand, these people come for the food. And therefore, if you're going to sit them on the top table, they're going to be very conscious. Everyone's looking at me. It's not going to give them any hana. Let's give them their pure hana, the real benefit, and let them sit on the side. Let them sit at the end. Let them be able to enjoy the Suda without anyone staring at them. Says the Dubna Maggid. The difference is the same with Eretz Yisrael and every other nation. Why? He says because the truth of the matter is every other place of the world, people are looking to fill themselves with gashmias. They're looking to fill themselves, whether it's food, whether it's entertainment, whatever it may be. In Eretz Yisrael, they're not doing that. In Eretz Yisrael, people are here for the ruchnias, for the spirituality, for what Eretz Yisrael possesses as a connection to our history. You know, look at the events of what's going on in the world and you see a world that's gone upside down. When you land in Eretz Yisrael, most people are familiar with this. You feel like, we got home. We're home, we're in Israel, we're on Eretz Yisrael. This is incredible. Why? Because the Yid naturally feels connected here in Eretz Yisrael. The Rabbanu Shem Shebe'ez Hashem give us siyata d'shmaya to get through this time, to get through this difficult time. But here, Rabbi Say, here in Eretz Yisrael, here in Israel, is the best place to be. It's the place that every Yid feels at home. And the Rabbanu Shem will give us siyata d'shmaya to be here, Be'ez Hashem.